The job sounded too good to be true. Night shifts weren't supposed to pay this well, especially not for something as seemingly mundane as walking around a warehouse. But when you're broke and desperate, you don't ask too many questions. The building itself loomed like a tomb against the horizon, all jagged corners and crumbling bricks, half swallowed by the fog that rolled in from the city's outskirts. Towering over the derelict shipping district, it had that kind of abandoned quality that made your skin crawl. Even the streetlights around it flickered like they didn't want to illuminate it too much. Mr. Grayson, my new boss, met me just outside the rusting front gates. He was a thin man with sunken eyes and a nervous twitch in his jaw. His coat looked one size too large, and he gripped the ring of keys in his hand like a lifeline. "You Jake?" he asked, voice hoarse. I nodded, and he handed me the keys without meeting my gaze. "These are for the main doors, the office, and the gate. Don't lose them. And listen to me carefully. Don't go near the east wing at all." I frowned. "Why not?" He looked past me, toward the hulking shape of the building, like he was afraid it might overhear. "Just stick to your rounds, all right? Don't ask questions about the last guy." That got my attention. What happened to him? Grayson flinched. He heard them, the voices. Before I could ask what that meant, he turned and practically sprinted to his car, disappearing down the street without another word. Welcome to the job, I thought grimly. Inside, the warehouse was cold and silent. The kind of silence that wraps around you and presses against your eardrums. It smelled like rust, mildew, and old wood. The security booth was a narrow metal room, with a wall of monitors, a two-way radio, and a logbook that hadn't been updated in weeks. Most of the camera feeds showed long, empty aisles. Shadowed shelves sagged with dusty crates. Only the east wing camera glitched every few seconds, flashing. Static, then going black entirely. Faulty wiring, I told myself. That's all. I tried the radio for a test check. Static hissed in response. A second later, I heard what sounded like a voice buried in the noise soft. Unintelligible, like a whisper caught in the wires. I turned it off, heart thumping louder than I liked. Maybe the last guy just went crazy in here. Easy to do, I figured. Grabbing my flashlight, I started my first patrol. The building groaned as if it were breathing. Pipes creaked overhead, and the lights above flickered lazily. Every step I took echoed tenfold, making it sound like someone else was walking just behind me. I turned corners too quickly, expecting to see something, somewhat, but always found. Only rows of shelves and dust motes floating in the stale air. Halfway down the main corridor, I stopped dead. A door marked East Wing stood ajar. I had seen it locked earlier. Grayson had made a point to show me the bolt. But now it was open, just enough to reveal darkness beyond. I approached slowly, my flashlight flickering like a candle in a storm. A gust of cold air wafted from the gap. It carried with it a metallic scent like blood and wet stone. My heart was hammering now. Probably just a draft, I whispered to myself. That's when the intercom crackled again. I hadn't touched it. The static buzzed to life, then went quiet. And then I heard it. My name. ... Jake ... It was so soft. I thought I had imagined it. But then it came again. ... Jake ... Come closer ... I stumbled back from the east wing door, suddenly aware of just how alone I was in that warehouse. Or maybe not alone at all. The flashlight flickered harder. The voice grew stronger, wrapped in static and shadow. Jake ... You're close? Come see ... I should have run. Any sane person would have. But instead I stepped forward. The door creaked open as I pushed through into the darker part of the warehouse. The hum in the air was stronger now, a vibration that made my bones ache. The deeper I walked, the more warped the space felt, like the angles of the hallway bent in ways they shouldn't. And the voices, they weren't just calling me anymore. They were whispering over one another in a language I didn't understand. It wasn't English. It wasn't anything I'd ever heard before. I stopped at a rusted metal door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, groaning as if in protest when I pushed it open. Inside was pitch black. The hum stopped. Silence. Then, stay, dot. I spun around, shining my light wildly. Nothing, but I felt it. Breath against my neck. The air behind me moved. I turned again, and for a heartbeat, I saw a shape standing in the shadows just outside the beam of my flashlight. Tall, strong, its limbs too long and its face shrouded in black. Then the light went out. Everything was darkness. The light died with a flicker and a hiss, leaving me blind in the pitch-black corridor. I stood frozen, every hair on my body standing straight, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. I could feel something was there close. Watching, breathing, a faint hum returned, vibrating in my skull like a tuning fork pressed against bone. Then whispers. They slithered out of the darkness, not from any single direction, but from everywhere at once. Soft, layered voices that brushed against the edge of comprehension. My name threaded through them, spoken in voices that sounded like they had been dragged through gravel and glass. Jake ... Come closer ... double quotes. You belong to us ... My fingers trembled as I banged my flashlight against my palm, desperate to get it working again. The bulb flickered, blinked, and finally glowed just enough to light the narrow hall around me. There was nothing in front of me. I turned slowly, sweeping the light behind me. Still nothing, but the cold remained, and so did the hum. I backed out of the corridor, my steps slow, careful. The moment I stepped through the east wing door and pulled it shut, the temperature seemed to rise a few degrees. My breath no longer fogged in front of me. The humming stopped. But the silence was wrong now. Heavy, like something was listening. I made my way back to the security booth, trying not to break into a sprint. My boots echoed off the concrete, and no matter how many times I looked over my shoulder, it felt like something was trailing just a few steps behind, watching, waiting. Inside the booth, I locked the door and slumped into the chair. My hands were shaking too hard to write anything coherent in the logbook, so I just sat there trying to slow my breathing. I checked the monitors again. Everything looked normal except for the east wing feed. It was still flickering, but now there was something new. A dark silhouette stood just outside the camera's field of view. You couldn't see it clearly, just the edge of its shoulder, a sliver of something humanoid. But it didn't move, it just stood there. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour, hoping it would go away. Hoping the feed would glitch and cut to black again. It didn't. The shape stayed exactly where it was. Eventually, I tore my eyes away and tried the radio. Mr. Grayson, come in. Static. Anyone, this is Jake at the Caraway warehouse. Something's not right here. I think more static. Then, just like before, a whisper cut through the noise. ... You shouldn't be here. ... But this time, it wasn't my name. It wasn't a coaxing voice. It sounded angry. Hungry. Then the screen blinked and the silhouette was gone. I stood up, gripping my flashlight like a weapon, unsure of what to do. Run? Call the cops? Tell. Then what exactly? That shadows were whispering my name? I was about to grab my keys and leave when the monitor for the main hallway lit up with motion. A crate was sliding across the floor, slowly, as if pulled by something invisible. Another. Crate toppled over. Then another. The cameras caught nothing but the aftermath boxes moving, falling, skittering across the concrete floor like they were being rearranged by unseen hands. And then one camera, a new angle I hadn't noticed before, zoomed in on a wall near. B-swing. Words were scrawled there in what looked like rust. No, not rust. It was too dark, too thick. The words were smeared across the bricks in frantic, clawed strokes. He's still here. My mouth went dry. I flipped through the other monitors, trying to remember if that writing had been there earlier. But I knew deep down that it hadn't. Someone or something had left that message recently. Maybe even while I was watching. I knew I had to check it. Had to confirm it was real. but I couldn't bring myself to go back down that hallway. Instead, I turned to the logbook, flipping to the very first page. It wasn't my handwriting. It wasn't anyone's I recognized. Scrawled in the margins over and over were words I hadn't written. Don't listen. Don't listen. Don't listen. Page after page. Same words. Getting shakier, more erratic, as if the writer had been losing their grip. The last page held a single line, deeply etched into the paper with pressure so intense the ink bled through. They only speak to the ones they choose. My heart pounded harder. Suddenly, the intercom crackled again. Only this time, the voice wasn't distorted. It was clear. It was mine, Jake, it said, in my voice. Why are you running? I stared at the speaker, frozen. Come back. Down, the voice continued. They want to meet you. I ran. No hesitation this time. I burst out of the booth and sprinted down the main hall toward the exit, not caring about protocol or keys or anything else. I just needed to get out. But as I reached the front door, I skidded to a halt. The lock was gone. Not broken. Not forced. Just gone. The deadbolt housing was still there, but the mechanism inside had vanished. Like it had never been there at all. Behind me, the lights began to shut off one by one, swallowed by the darkness. The whispering returned, louder than ever, forming words, songs. Voices layered over voices until they became a chorus of noise I couldn't shut out. Welcome, you're chosen. Jake ... stay. The warehouse had become a trap. The front door was sealed by some invisible force. The locking mechanism vanished like it had never existed. Behind me, the building's lights were dying. One by one, swallowed in rhythm with the whispering voices that echoed from every dark corner. I didn't know where to go, only that I couldn't stay there. So I ran not back to the booth, not toward the front gate, but deeper into the building. Away from the failing lights, guided only by the beam of my trembling flashlight and a gut feeling I couldn't explain. The voices weren't just calling anymore, they were leading. I found myself retracing my earlier patrol route, but this time everything had changed. The hall seemed longer, the turn sharper. Familiar signs were missing or scratched out. It was like the building had shifted, in some subtle, impossible way mapping itself around me. And I knew where I was going before I even saw it. The east wing door, it was open again. Wider now, gaping. I hesitated, flashlight trained on the void beyond. The cold air flowed from it like a steady exhale, thick with that strange metallic tang, blood, earth, rust, something dead. The hum began again. Not from the hallway, but from within me, like my blood was vibrating in time with the sound. It pulled at my thoughts, clouding them. My arms felt heavy, my legs numb. It was like falling asleep with your eyes open. And then a whisper, sharp and close. Come down, Jake. The flashlight flickered. I stepped forward. The corridor inside was darker than I remembered, like the shadows were thicker, heavier, clinging to the walls like cobwebs. I moved slowly, past crumbling shelves and half-empty crates that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. My beam caught something on the floor. Scratches. Deep grooves carved into the concrete. Jagged and erratic, like someone had been dragged had clawed their way toward the exit. I knelt to examine them. The air here was cold enough that my breath came in thick clouds. Then I heard it again, skittering. Fast, low, inhuman. I whipped the light toward the sound. Nothing. But the scratching continued, echoing around me. I stood and backed against the wall, pulse racing. A shape darted past the beam low to the ground, barely more than a blur. Not quite human. Too long, too fast. I caught a glimpse of limbs jointed wrong, then it vanished again behind a column. I wanted to run, but the hallway behind me was gone. Literally, when I turned around, there was only darkness stretching endlessly. No door, no exit. The building was changing. Or I was being pulled deeper into something that only looked like a warehouse. I forced myself to keep moving forward, down the hall that led to the rusted metal door I'd opened before. It stood ajar, groaning softly in the draft. Beyond it, the shadows swirled, thicker than ink. This time, I stepped through without hesitation. The room beyond was massive, larger than it should have been, far larger than any part of the building I'd seen on the floor plans. It was circular, domed like an old cistern or underground silo. Its walls were covered in black stains, symbols etched into the concrete in spiraling, overlapping patterns. And in the center, there was a chair. Chains hung from the ceiling, snapped at the ends like something had torn free. Around the base of the chair, the floor was stained a deep, congealed red. I didn't want to get closer, but I did. There was something behind the chair. No, someone. Motionless. The body was desiccated. Clothes torn and rotting, skin clinging to bone. The face was almost gone, but I could see just enough to recognize a human jaw. The last guard. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. Then, behind me, a door slammed shut. I turned to see the hallway vanish. Again, I was sealed in. And then, the whispering stopped. For a moment there was silence. True silence. Until something spoke. Not a whisper. Not a voice in my head. A voice that echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant, almost inhuman in its clarity. You were chosen, Jake, just like the others. I couldn't tell where. It felt like it came from the very walls, vibrating through the concrete. They listened. They followed. They opened the way. The room grew colder. My breath froze in the air. Shadows pulled along the ground, stretching out. From the corners, writhing like serpents across the floor. From within them, shapes began to emerge. Figures. They were humanoid, but barely too tall. Limbs too thin and too long. Faces obscured by moving blackness, like veils of smoke. Their presence made my skin crawl. My body screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. I backed toward the center of the room, toward the chair. The shadows followed, circling me like vultures. Then, from behind me, the corpse in the corner moved. Its jaw twitched. Its neck jerked. The lip, what was left of them, began to move. I leaned in, horrified. I warned you. The voice, rasped dry as paper, tried to fight it. His hollow eyes locked onto mine. But you opened the door. The shadows lunged. I swung the flashlight wildly. The beam cut through the dark like a blade briefly, pushing them back. But only for a moment. They recoiled, but then reformed. Stronger. Angrier. Jake, the voice in the wall said again. Gentle now. Stop running. The floor beneath the chair cracked, splitting open to reveal a chasm filled with darkness deeper than anything I'd ever seen. And from within that void, a face emerged. Not a human face. Something ancient. Something wrong. The face rising from the pit wasn't bound by bone or skin. It was a shifting mask of shadow and flickering light, an ever-changing swirl of features. That didn't belong together, human eyes paired with something serpentine. Mouths that opened vertically, teeth like obsidian shards. It looked at me, though it had no clear eyes, and I felt its gaze more than saw it. I stumbled back, heart slamming in my chest, nearly tripping over the chains that had once bound the chair. The temperature plummeted, my fingers were numb. Breath thick in the air. The whispers returned, not in my ears, but in my head, dozens of voices overlapping in an ancient, broken language. They weren't trying to communicate. They were trying to rewrite me, erase my thoughts and replace them. With their own, I clutched the flashlight like a weapon, but it felt as useful as a twig against a storm. The shifting face spoke, not in words, but in a vibration like I used my bones to make sound. You were seen. You were marked. Now you will carry us. The ground beneath me cracked, thin veins of black spreading out from the chasm like lightning frozen in concrete. The entire room pulsed with energy that made my teeth ache. Around the edges of the chamber, the humanoid shadows began to bow. They knelt like disciples before a god. That's when I understood. The last guard hadn't disappeared. He had been taken, changed, claimed, and now it was my turn. I turned and ran not toward the sealed hallway behind me, but to the far wall where a maintenance stairwell should have been. I didn't know if it was real or just another trick of the building, but I had no choice. I sprinted toward the far wall, the shadows shrieking behind me. The floor trembled. The whispers became screams. The face began to rise further, its massive form pulling itself from the pit like something that had been buried for centuries. Then an impact behind me. A tremor that sent cracks racing across the floor. I didn't look back. I hit the far wall, feeling along its surface until, yes, a handle hidden behind a rusted metal plate. I yanked it. A narrow stairwell opened, choked with cobwebs and dust. It descended not into the pit, but into another hallway, one I didn't remember seeing on any map. I didn't hesitate. I slammed. The door shut behind me and ran down the stairs. The air changed again. Still cold, but still like the space hadn't been touched in years. My flashlight beam caught glimpses of long dead rats, discarded boxes, mold crawling up the walls like veins. I didn't stop moving. The hallway leveled out, stretching toward a rusted elevator shaft. The doors were jammed open, the lift itself stuck somewhere between levels. I shone the light down. It was empty, but a ladder ran along the wall inside. From above, I heard the door I had come through shatter. They were following. I grabbed the ladder and climbed down into the shaft. Every rung groaned under my weight, flaking rust into the darkness below. I had no idea where I was going. Only that I couldn't let them catch me. The whispers echoed down the shaft deeper, more distorted, now sounding like something chewing on language itself. We see you. We wear your face. We were here before light. I reached the bottom of another corridor, this one older than anything else I'd seen in the warehouse. The walls were stone, the air was thick, heavy with rot. I stumbled forward, flashlight bouncing off damp brick and the glint of something metallic on the ground. A name tag, F. Morale's night security, the last guard. This had been his way out, except ... he hadn't made it. The walls here were etched with more writing scratched in with nails, metal, whatever he could find. Don't listen. They're in the walls. Speak their name and they find you. The writing grew more frantic the further I walked. The door never closes. I saw myself watching me. They're all Emmy. Then at the very end of the corridor, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. Another monitor. Old CRT style, humming faintly with static. It was cracked in the corner but still working. I stepped closer. The feed showed the security booth, my security booth, but it wasn't empty. Someone me sat in a chair, watching the screens. His face turned toward the camera and he smiled. His eyes were black voids. I stepped back, shaking. The lights overhead buzzed to life. I was back in the warehouse. No, not back. I never left. The stairwell, the ladder, the corridor. It was all part of it, just deeper layers of the same maze. My radio buzzed again. I almost didn't answer it, but something in me needed to hear any voice. I pressed the button. Grayson? Please, tell me what's happening. Silence. Then, he's already gone, Jake. A woman's voice. Then a child's. Then mine. All layered. You're next. I dropped the radio. It clattered to the stone floor and sputtered static, but I didn't bother picking it up. My hand felt numb. My legs, too. It was like the farther I went into this place, the more I was losing my connection to myself. My body, my mind, none of it felt grounded anymore. The monitor still displayed me, me sitting calmly in the booth, smiling with those void black eyes. The screen flickered once and he stood up. The image panned as if the camera itself was following him as he left the booth and started, walking toward the camera room. Toward me, I stumbled backward. My breathing grew shallow. I wasn't watching a feed. I was watching the future. I turned and ran. The corridor twisted unnaturally, branching into paths that hadn't existed a minute ago. Stone gave way to corroded metal, then to stained concrete. My flashlight began to dim, not because of the batteries. It felt like the darkness itself was swallowing the light. My boots pounded against the floor, but I couldn't hear them anymore. The air absorbed all sound. I turned a corner, nearly slipping on a wet patch of mold-covered tile, and skidded to a halt. In front of me was a massive mirror. Just a mirror. out of place and cracked, mounted on the wall of this decaying underground corridor, like it belonged in a suburban hallway. I should have ignored it. But something pulled me forward. The reflection showed me shaken, filthy, wild-eyed. But the background wasn't the same. Behind my reflection was the security booth, the monitors, my chair. It was like the mirror showed another version of me, one still trapped in the booth, staring at the cameras like nothing had ever happened. Then, slowly, my reflection looked up at me. We locked eyes, and it smiled. My own face, my own expression. But wrong, too wide, too sharp, come back. It mouthed. I turned away, but the hallway was gone. There was only the mirror now. A wall of it, stretching out on both sides, and all of them showed me different versions. One sobbing, one banging on glass, one standing still, completely blank, and one just smiling, head tilted, mimicking. Every move I made half a second before I made it. I stepped back and felt the edge of the corridor reappear behind me like a trick of the mind. The air shifted again. This place wasn't haunted. It was alive, watching, reacting. I didn't know where I was anymore, what part of the warehouse, what floor, what dimension of whatever this was. But I kept moving, because stopping meant being swallowed by the things behind those mirrors. The whispers returned, quieter now, less aggressive, like they were trying to soothe me. He's almost ready, just a little farther. Bring him down. I reached another hallway. At the far end, a single steel door stood open, just a crack, light flickering from inside like candlelight. My steps slowed, instincts flaring. But something about that door called to me. Not with words, with memory. The scent drifting from beyond it, old oil, sweat, dust, it felt familiar. Like I'd been there before. And then I remembered the dreams, nightmares I'd had even before I took this job. Hallways, endless ones. Lights that never stayed lit, whispers just out of reach. How could I have forgotten? Was it just deja vu? Or had I been drawn here all along? I reached the door and pressed it open with the toe of my boot. Inside was a room not much bigger than a closet, a desk, a chair, a filing cabinet toppled on its side, and a body, slumped in the corner, long dead, but not decayed like the one I saw earlier, preserved somehow, frozen in a twisted posture of fear, as if death had frozen him mid-scream. Clutched in his hand was a notebook. I stepped forward slowly in pride. It loose. The pages were covered in smears, but I could still make out some of it. They keep copies of us. I saw mine talking to Grayson before I even took the job. This place chooses you. You think you choose it, but that's a lie. The East Wing is a mouth. The building is a body. We walk through its veins. There's no outside. Not really. Just layers. When you try to escape, you just go deeper. The final page was blank, except for one line scrawled in all caps. Don't look at your reflection. I looked up, and there on the wall opposite the door was another mirror, and it was already reflecting me. Except I hadn't stepped into the room yet. The figure in the glass was already inside, smiling, head tilting, eyes black. I screamed and slammed the notebook shut, bolting out of the room. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct told me that if I looked into that mirror again, I'd never come back out. I ran until my lungs felt like fire, until my legs gave out. And when I collapsed, I was no longer in the basement corridor. I was back at the security booth. Everything was clean. Still. Lit. The monitors were on, displaying normal feeds. I sat in a chair, dazed. Had I imagined everything? Then the intercom buzzed, crackling. Jake? A voice said. It was Grayson. My heart surged. Grayson, listen to me, I shouted. Something's wrong here. I saw. But the voice cut me off. Not Grayson now. Me, whispering. You never left, Jake. And on the monitor, I saw myself walking slowly back toward the booth. But I was already there, no reflection. Number. Camera lag. Just two of me. One watching. One arriving. The voice continued, soft and final. You were always here. I stood frozen in the security booth, staring at the monitor. There I was, walking down the hall. But I was also here in the chair, heart thundering in my chest, watching it unfold. It didn't make sense, unless one of us wasn't. Real. The radio buzzed again, just a whisper now. Time to clock out. Jake got ... The lights above the hallway figure began to flicker one by one as he neared the booth. With each dying light, the corridor dimmed, until the only source of illumination was the glow from the monitors themselves. The air grew thick, heavy, electric. I stood up, backing away from the screens as the door to the booth creaked open. But no one stepped through. Instead, a voice filled the room, not a whisper this time. It was calm, cold. There must always be a guard. The flashlight in my hand sparked, then died completely. The screens began to show static, then blackness, then faces. Not one, not two, dozens. All of them were me, staring, grinning, eyes hollow and empty. Each screen flickered between angles of the warehouse, and in every one, a version of me walked. The halls, one passed the east wing. One stood silently in the storage room. One sat, unmoving, in a chair surrounded by chains. Another wept in a dark stairwell, trapped, all of them. I spun, grabbing the keys from the console and bursting out of the booth. I didn't know where I was running anymore. There was no exit. Every hallway I took led me in circles. Every stairwell brought me back to the same floor. The building wasn't just alive. It was a loop, a feeding loop. I sprinted past a hallway mirror and saw myself again, this time not moving in sync. The reflection was grinning, tilting its head, slowly, as if mocking me. I smashed the mirror with my flashlight. Glass rained down, but behind the cracked surface was another layer of glass. And behind that, another me. Just standing, watching. I kept running. Eventually, I reached the east wing once more. The door stood wide open. The cold rolled out like breath from a deep throat. Somewhere deep in the dark, something called my name again. Not in a whisper, but in reverence. Jake ... I should have turned and gone the other way, but there was nowhere else to go. I stepped through the door for the last time. The corridor was longer, now impossibly long. The walls breathed, pulsing like veins. The lights above buzzed with a rhythm like a heartbeat. At the far end, where I had once found a locked chamber, the floor had cracked open fully. The pit was now a gaping, endless hole, and something massive stirred within it. I moved slowly, flashlight clutched like a weapon, eyes scanning every shadow. Around me, the air trembled with voices. You know us now. You are part of us. He left, you stayed. You belong. I reached the pit and looked down. There was no bottom-only writhing shadow, faces shifting in and out of the dark. Some of them mine, some of them worse. From deep below, something began to rise again. That monstrous, flickering face I'd seen before, bigger now, more defined. The tendrils of shadow that surrounded it moved like smoke and seaweed, fluid and sentient. And it spoke, not aloud, in my mind. You brought us through. We needed a watcher, a vessel, a voice. I stumbled back, slipping on the edge. You are no longer alone. I looked down at my hands. They weren't mine anymore. The skin was gray, taut, cold, veins black as ink coiled under the surface, shifting like they were alive. The change had started. I screamed, but even my voice didn't sound like mine. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned and saw the other. Me still whole, still untouched, eyes wide with horror as he took in what I had become. He was me from before? Somehow, the building had brought him in, just as it had brought me. There must always be a guard. I reached for him, not to hurt him, but to warn him. But he screamed, turned, and ran, exactly like I had done. Around me, the voices grew joyful. The cycle continues. The door stays open. The shift never ends. I collapsed at the edge of the pit as the transformation completed. The last of me unraveled, thought by thought, memory by memory. I tried to remember what I looked like. what it sounded like, what my name even was. But it was fading. All I had now was the booth, the monitors, the watching, and the waiting. I don't remember how long I've been here. Sometimes I hear my name over the radio. Sometimes I think I see someone sitting in the booth. But the cameras show nothing, and the lights keep dying, and the east wing door, it's always open now, waiting. When I inherited my grandmother's estate, I expected dust, doilies, and maybe a few bittersweet memories. What I didn't expect was dread. The house stood at the end of a gravel path that wound like a snake through thick woods, so dense. They swallowed the last bit of daylight long before sunset. It had been years since I'd last visited. I remembered it as warm and bright, a place of tea and stories and the soft clack of knitting needles. But now it looked like it had been holding its breath. 2 stories tall, the house towered above me, its dark wooden siding nearly lost in the shadows of the pine trees. Ivy clung to its bones. The windows were like eyes clouded, staring, silent. When I reached the porch, the air changed, heavier, thicker, like stepping into someone else's dream. The key the lawyer gave me slid smoothly into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing the stillness inside. Dust motes danced in a slanting light. The furniture was all still there, preserved in time like a shrine to her absence. Doilies still sat beneath vases. Her favorite rocking chair rested by the fire. The air smelled faintly of lavender. And something else. Something older. I stepped inside and a door creak closed behind me. My footsteps echoed across the floorboards. Every room I entered felt more familiar than the last, and yet I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. I told myself it was just the weight of the past, the memories. But the house disagreed. That night, I curled up in the guest room, the only bed that didn't feel wrong. Outside, the wind brushed the trees like whispers. I pulled the quilt over my shoulders and stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the heaviness pressing in around me. And that's when I heard it. Faint, but clear just beyond the edge of hearing. A whisper, coming from the vent. I sat up, holding my breath, straining to hear. It was so soft I thought maybe I imagined it. But then it came again like someone trying to speak through the walls. No words, just breath and presence. It didn't feel like an animal. It felt human. I turned on the lamp and stared at the vent, heart thudding in my chest. The whispering stopped. Silence returned. I laughed nervously and shook my head. Old. Houses made noises. Pipes, ducks, drafts. That's all it was. I turned off the light and lay back down. Then the tapping started. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic, deliberate, measured, like fingers on wood. It came from above me, from the attic. I froze, staring up at the ceiling. My breath caught in my throat. Tap, tap, tap. Not wind, not pipes, not creaks, knocking. I told myself I was being stupid. It was probably a loose shutter. Maybe a branch? Brushing the roof. My grandmother always said I had an overactive imagination, but something about the sound felt intentional. I lay there for what felt like hours, listening, the noise coming in bursts, sometimes 3 knocks, sometimes 4. Then silence, then again. Eventually, I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, I told myself I would check it out. Rule it out, put my mind at ease. But as I passed the attic stairs, I stopped short. The attic door, which had always been locked tight, was hanging open. The lock dangled from the latch, snapped like it had been forced open from the inside. I stared for a long time, hand hovering near the railing, before I finally turned away. Not yet, I thought. I needed coffee. Light. Sanity. I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself. Cleaned. Opened windows. Took a walk down the old trails behind the property. Found the garden, now overgrown and wild. My grandmother's world, now half swallowed. By time, I found myself thinking about her. She'd always been a little strange, quiet, superstitious. She kept things to herself, never let anyone into the attic, never spoke much about the past. But she had loved me. That much I knew. She'd also warned me once never to stay in the house alone. I had laughed, thinking it was just her old-fashioned paranoia. Now, I wasn't so sure. That night, I brought a flashlight with me to bed. I told myself I wouldn't be spooked again. I left the bedroom door open, just in case. I lay awake again for hours, staring at the ceiling. No whispers, no tapping, just silence. And then a voice, clear, right behind the wall. Emma. I bolted upright, nearly dropping the flashlight. The voice was soft, familiar. It sounded like her. Emma ... help me. I grabbed the flashlight and stormed into the hallway. The air was freezing. The attic door was still open. The darkness beyond looked endless. I stood at the foot of the stairs, flashlight trembling in my hand. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came again, directly above me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I climbed the stairs. At the top, I hesitated and stepped inside. The attic smelled of dust, wood rot, and something older. Furniture lay under sheets like forgotten corpses. Spiderwebs clung to the beams. The beam of my flashlight cut a shaky path through the dark. And there, in the center of the room, was a table. On it sat a wooden box, untouched by dust. As if it had been waiting. The box didn't belong there. In a room thick with cobwebs and dust, this small wooden chest sat pristine. No grime, no signs of time. Its surface was carved with delicate etchings, worn but still visible, symbols that matched nothing I recognized. The edges were chipped, corners bruised with age, but the clasp gleamed faintly in my flashlight's beam. I stepped closer. The floor groaned beneath my feet like a warning, but I didn't stop. I reached out, fingertips hovering just above. The lid, the air shifted. Then a voice low, breathy, right in my ear. Leave it alone. I recoiled, stumbling backward and nearly dropping the flashlight. It clattered on the floor, the light flickering erratically. My breath hitched in my throat. I spun around, but the attic was empty. The voice had been so clear, so close. I shivered, skin crawling, and forced myself to retrieve the flashlight. The beam landed back on the box. It hadn't moved. But now something inside me needed to know what was within. I knelt and unlatched it. Inside was a stack of old yellowed letters bound with a faded blue ribbon. Beneath them, tucked in a layer of velvet, was a small leather-bound journal. The cover was cracked, brittle with age, the initials EL stamped into the corner. Alien. Langford, my grandmother. Hands trembling, I opened the first page. The early entries were calm, mundane. Notes about garden days and weather, reminiscences of my childhood visits. But as I flipped further, the tone darkened. The handwriting became erratic, uneven. The thoughts more fragmented. Something is in the walls again. I heard it whispering last night. They know I'm alone now. The door must stay shut. I am the only one who knows where it is. The only one who can keep him inside. It waits. It watches. It pretends to be her, but it isn't her. I swallowed hard. The final entries were nearly illegible, ink-smeared, lines scratched out. But one line had been circled in what looked like dried blood. If I die, do not listen to the voice. It lies. A thud echoed from below. Not a creak. Not a tap. A thud. Deliberate. Weighted, like someone slamming a hand against the wall. Then came the whisper, distant but clear, echoing up from below the floorboards. Emma ... come down here. My blood turned to ice. I backed toward the attic stairs, clutching the journal to my chest. As I reached the threshold, I cast one last glance at the box on the table. The letters had been moved. The hall below was bathed in moonlight now, filtering through the warped windows in pale silver shafts. Everything was still, silent, too. Silent. I descended slowly, one creaking step at a time. I expected the whispers to stop, but they didn't. They grew louder, and more voices joined them. Some murmured my name. Others just wept. One laughed softly, a rasping, hollow sound that echoed through the vent grates. They were everywhere in the walls, the ceilings, the floors, surrounding me. I followed the sound down the hall to the narrow door that led to the basement. It had changed. Once plain, now it was carved covered in symbols that matched the margins of the journal pages. Spirals, crosses, circles within circles. Some fresh, some old. I touched one with the pad of my finger. The wood pulsed. I jerked my hand away. The handle was ice cold, but it turned easily. The hinges moaned as I opened the door, revealing steep stairs vanishing into darkness. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, mold, and something else. Rot. I swallowed bile and clicked on the flashlight. The beam struggled against the oppressive, dark, swallowing the light whole. Still, I stepped down, one slow tread at a time. Each footfall echoed off stone walls. About halfway down, my light caught something on the wall scratches, deep and frenzied, carved by something with desperate strength. And symbols, always the symbols. The tapping returned. Not faint this time. Violent, like fists pounding against metal. I reached the bottom and froze. There was a door set into the far wall half hidden behind a collapsed shelf and a blanket of mildew. Chains wound around it, secured with rusted iron locks. The door was different, made of dark wood, swollen with age, and covered in carvings too deep to be natural. I recognized some from the journal's last pages. And then the voice again. Closer. Emma ... help me ... please. My grandmother's voice. Or something wearing it. I stepped closer. The air grew colder with each inch. My flashlight flickered. I hesitated. My hand reached for the journal. There, on the bottom corner of the last legible page, were 6 words scrawled in shaky red ink. Do not open. Bury the key. There was no key. Or maybe it wanted me. To find it, the whispers became screams. Emma! I stumbled back, heart pounding, journal clutched to my chest. Something moved behind the door. The chains rattled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The basement walls seemed to breathe. I fled bounding up the stairs, 2 at a time, slamming the door shut behind me and turning the lock. The voices didn't stop. They only laughed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every lamp turned on, wrapped in a blanket, the journal open in my lap like a talisman. The house felt ... closer, like the walls had crept in, like the shadows pressed tighter. Every now and then, I heard the groan of floorboards upstairs, though I hadn't been up there since the attic. Something was moving around, something that wasn't me. At dawn, the whispers finally faded. The house settled into that eerie quiet I was beginning to dread. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long, slatted shadows across the floor. I made coffee with shaking hands and stared at the basement door the whole time. It hadn't moved. Not yet. I needed answers. I needed to know what my grandmother had trapped down there and why it sounded like her. The journal had pages torn out, smudged symbols, rambling entries about rituals and feeding the seals and binding blood to wood. But one phrase kept repeating, always. Underlined. It lies beneath. Beneath what? The basement? The house? I flipped to one of the few legible diagrams and spotted something I hadn't noticed before. An overhead sketch of the house. The basement. The attic. And between them, a void. No floor. No ceiling. Just a black space with a symbol drawn inside. It like a sun with too many rays. The caption read, "The Hollow Root." I didn't know what that meant, but I had to find it. That afternoon, I tore through the house. Floorboards, crawl spaces, hollow walls. The place was old, built with secrets. Every creak of the stairs, every groan of the beams made me jump, but something told me I wasn't just being paranoid. I was being followed. I felt it behind me, just beyond vision. Like something had pulled itself out of the walls, and now watched from the corners waiting. Every mirror showed movement I didn't make. Every vent hissed with voices just below the range of hearing. I found it in the study, a loose floorboard behind a desk. It came up with a pry bar and a sickening crack. Beneath it, a narrow tunnel just big enough to crawl through descended into blackness. The air pouring out was cold and wet, like opening the mouth of a crypt. I hesitated at the edge. That was when I heard it again. The whisper. My name. Emma dot dot dot. But this time, it didn't come from the basement. It came from the tunnel. I took the flashlight and the journal, tied a scarf around my face to block the moldy air, and I crawled inside. The passage sloped down at an angle, dirt and roots pressing in on all sides. The smell was thick with rot and something metallic. I could barely breathe. Every inch forward felt like a mistake. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a hidden chamber. A natural hollow, like a womb carved from the earth. The walls were lined with bones. Not human, I told myself. Too small. Maybe not. But that wasn't what made me scream. In the center of the chamber, embedded in the floor like a forgotten relic, was a wooden trapdoor identical to the one in the basement. Chains wrapped around it, but they were broken, rusted through and shattered, and burned into the wood. In a crude, bloody scrawl was my name. Emma scratched, carved. I backed away, tripping over a ribcage. The flashlight flickered. I slammed the journal shut and turned to crawl out. But the tunnel had changed. It wasn't there anymore. The wall was solid, cold, dirt and roots, no opening, no escape. And then the voice behind me said, "You've come back to me." I spun. There was a figure standing over the trapdoor. Thin, pale, eyes like pits in the skull. A face I almost recognized, but twisted, stretched into something monstrous. It looked like my grandmother, but it smiled with too many teeth. "Emma," it rasped. I waited so long. I bolted, slamming my shoulder into the wall where the tunnel had been. The dirt shifted. I clawed at it, nails breaking, fingers bleeding. It wouldn't budge. Behind me, the trapdoor creaked open. A sound like thousands of voices crying out at once flooded the chamber. The shadows rose, black and formless. They spilled from the door like ink and water, snaking toward me. I turned and screamed. And then, light. The flashlight, dim and dying, landed on the journal. Pages flapping. One glowed faintly etched in red. A symbol. A word. I shouted it without thinking. The shadow paused. Just for a second. And in that second, the dirt wall opened. I didn't wait. I dove through, scrambled back into the crawl space, heart slamming against my ribs. I could still hear them screaming my name from below. The tunnel trembled. Roots burst from the walls, lashing toward me. One wrapped around my ankle, but I kicked free. I emerged into the study, coughing, covered in dirt and blood. And I slammed. The floorboard shut. The whispering stopped. For now. I staggered into the hallway and collapsed against the wall, hands shaking violently. My clothes were soaked, my throat raw. I felt like I'd aged 10 years, but I understood now. Whatever had been sealed down there, it wasn't just haunting the house. It was the house, and I'd cracked its cage. The house hasn't been quiet since I crawled out of that tunnel. The whispering hasn't stopped, it just changed. Now it mimics things I remember. A lullaby my grandmother used to hum. The creak of her rocker upstairs. My own voice calling from the next room. I know better than to follow it now. Something followed me out of the hollow root. I feel it in the walls, beneath the floorboards, inside the mirrors, watching, listening, waiting. I've stopped sleeping. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. Not as I remembered her, but as she was in that chamber. Hollow eyes, black teeth, that smile. She whispers my name in the dark, corners of the ceiling, behind light fixtures, in the static of the radio when I try to drown her out. Sometimes, when I pass by the attic stairs, I hear someone breathing just on the other side of the door. I've been trying to piece together the final ritual. The journal is fragmented pages, torn or stained beyond legibility. But I found a folded sheet tucked between the back cover and the leather binding. A diagram of the attic, circles within circles. sigils I don't understand, annotations in my grandmother's frantic handwriting. Final seal must be broken and remade, cleansed with fire, bind with blood. Only blood of the lion can close it. Don't listen to her voice. That isn't me. I couldn't leave reading that last part because last night she spoke to me through the walls, not in a whisper, in a conversation. I was in the kitchen reading by the stove when the wall beside me groaned, not like settling wood, like something shifting. And then I heard her, Emma, you've been so brave. It was my grandmother's voice, perfectly hers. The cadence, the warmth, but it was hollow underneath. I froze. She continued, you don't have to fight this. You don't have to suffer like I did. Just open the door. Finish what I started. I had pressed my ear to the wall. My heart thundered. What door? I asked. She paused. The one beneath the root. The real door. You've only found the threshold. My blood ran cold. She kept talking, gently as if coaxing a frightened child. You've always been curious, Emma. You're strong. Stronger than I was. You can survive it. You have to. We're bound now, you and me. I backed away. The walls pulsed. I ran from the room, slammed the door, and locked myself in the study. But her voice followed. In the radiator, in the space behind the bookshelf. Always sounding close, but never seen. Today, I started preparing for the final ritual. I don't have a priest or sage or instructions I fully understand, but I have the journal, the chalk, the herbs, and the last dregs of courage that haven't yet turned to ash. I've cleared the attic of everything. The sheet-covered furniture, the dust-choked relics, the rocking chair. That damned rocking chair, I burned it in the fireplace downstairs. It screamed. The wood didn't pop or crack, it screamed. Like it was alive, like I was killing something still conscious. The flames turned black for a moment, and then silence. One symbol remains to be drawn, a broken circle. A figure reaching upward, arms open, mouth wide. It's on every corner of the attic, carved into the wood. My grandmother drew it in blood. And so it felt like something inside me broke when I did it. Like a door within my own thoughts creaked open, and something slipped through. Now, every mirror in the house shows a different version of me. They move when I don't, smile when I cry, whisper when I scream. It's getting worse. The walls don't just whisper now, they breathe. I can feel them pulsing when I walk past. Warm air sometimes wafts from the vents, but the heat is wrong. It smells like iron and rot. Yesterday, I found a tooth under my pillow. I live alone. I haven't been sleeping. And tonight, the basement door creaked open on its own. I armed myself with a crowbar and went down. The trapdoor in the basement, the one with the chains, was gone. Just gone. The wood beneath was scorched, blackened, like it had burned from within. The cold was unbearable. My flashlight flickered and died, and then I heard the voice again, from inside me. It's time. I don't know how much time I have left. The entity, whatever it is, feeds on attention, on focus. I can feel it in my mind now, like a spider resting in the hollow. Between thoughts, it waits until I blink, until I breathe, until I start to believe it was never real. And then it whispers, we were never apart. The attic is ready. I've drawn the final circle. I've copied the ritual from the journal to the best of my ability. All that's left is the final offering. The line of blood. I am the last in the Langford line. And only blood of the line can end this, even if it cost me everything. The night I chose to perform the ritual, the house closed in. On me. Windows fogged from the inside. Doors I'd locked hours ago now stood open, and every mirror reflected not me, but her. My grandmother, smiling, silent, patient. I had sealed off the attic with salt, chalk, and sigils taken from the journal. Candles flickered in each corner of the ritual circle, their flames bending unnaturally, drawn toward the center, like gravity had reversed. I stood in the middle, the journal clutched in one hand, the knife in the other, and I waited. The moment the clock struck midnight, the house moaned, not creaked, moaned, like something ancient and wounded was waking beneath the foundation. The floor trembled underfoot. Shadows thickened along the corners of the attic, coiling inward, pressing against the circle's boundary like hungry beasts. Testing a cage, I read the first incantation aloud. The language scratched at my throat. The words were jagged, not made for a human mouth. But I forced them out, one syllable at a time, as the walls began to bleed. Yes, bleed. Dark, oily liquid seeped from the cracks in the beams, dripping onto the chalk sigils. They sizzled and smoked, but held barely. The shadows recoiled, and that's when she appeared. Not the twisted creature from the tunnel. Not the reflection. In the mirror, her or something that wore her skin perfectly. My grandmother stepped into the attic without opening the door. 1 second, there was empty air. The next, she was standing just outside the circle, her eyes dark, bottomless, the smile too wide to be real. She looked younger than I remembered. Her hair braided, her voice calm. "Emma," she said, "you don't have to do this." I tightened my grip on the knife. "You're not her." She tilted her head. "I was, once, before the house took root in me, before it bound itself to our bloodline." My breath caught. "You invited in?" I asked. Her smile faded. "It was already here. I just fed it so it wouldn't starve. I gave it pieces of myself, pieces of others. You don't understand. Emma is not evil. It's hungry. And if you don't feed it, it will eat everything." The candles flared. The house trembled again. A rift opened in the ceiling, a vertical slit of black, as if the sky itself had torn. Whispers poured from it like rain. "Emma, Emma, stay. Emma, we remember." Hundreds of voices, all sounding like mine. I dropped to my knees inside the circle. Blood was required to finish the seal. My blood. The knife hovered over my palm. My grandmother took a step closer. "Don't," she said, voice shaking for the first time. "You think you're sealing it, but you're offering yourself. You'll become the next anchor." I looked up. "Then why did you write the ritual?" She said nothing. Her mouth opened, and a second voice came from inside her, deep, cracked, echoing. "Because she wanted to leave, just like you." Her smile returned, twisted, glassy, broken. I slashed. My palm, blood hit the floor. The chalk glowed red, then white hot. The air exploded in screams. My grandmother's body convulsed, her head snapping back unnaturally, as something inside her fought to stay. Her skin cracked like porcelain, revealing black light beneath. The shadows screamed in unison. They hurled themselves against the circle. One after another, they collided with the barrier, howling, desperate to break through, but the blood held them back. I screamed the final word of the incantation, and the circle shattered. But not like I expected. The light exploded outward. The shadows imploded, and in their place stood Aye, another me. She stood where my grandmother had been, wearing my face. Her skin glistened with oil, her smile calm. "You think this ends with blood?" she said. "Blood is where it begins." Then she stepped into the circle. The protective barrier didn't stop her, because she wasn't outside anymore. She was inside me. Pain. My mind split. I felt myself falling down, like the floor had dropped into the hollow root. Memories unraveled. I couldn't tell which thoughts were mine anymore, which voice was mine, which body. The journal lay open on the floor. One final line written in blood. "If the blood fails, burn it all." I woke up gasping on the floor. The candles were out. The attic was silent, and the house felt still, but not empty. I crawled to the journal, barely able to move. The reflection in the window watched me, smiling, waiting. The attic is empty now, but I'm still here. I've scrubbed the sigils off the floor, burned the journal, boarded the door. But no matter what I do, the house remembers. It hums when I move, breathes when I sleep, and somewhere behind the walls, she's still whispering. Or maybe it's me. I tried to leave, packed a bag, drove until the forest broke and the town returned. The air was different there, lighter, thinner. For a moment, I believed I was free. Then I saw the reflection. In the shop window, behind my own eyes, something else blinked and smiled. The same way she had. I turned around, got back in the car, and drove straight home, because there's no out. Not anymore. I've stopped calling it grandmother's house. It isn't hers. It never was. This house doesn't belong to anyone. It keeps people. Pieces of them. Voices. Memories. Skin. Sometimes. They become part of the wood, the air, the dust in the corners. I am part of it now, too. The mirrors show me wearing clothes I've never owned, standing in rooms that don't exist anymore. Sometimes I watch myself sleep. I see my body turn under the sheets, while my reflection stays perfectly still, smiling. There are no more rats in the walls. No pipes knocking. No wind moaning through cracks. There's just dot 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 her. She walks the halls now, day and night. Not like before. Not like the twisted thing from the basement or the shadow that wore my face. She's whole now, because she has me. And I have her. I found things in my closet. Letters in my handwriting, but I never wrote them. Entries in the burned journal. A second key around my neck I don't remember putting on. Blood under my fingernails. I woke up yesterday in the attic, lying inside the ritual circle. No candles. No chalk. Just dust and dried blood. There was a mark carved into the floor beneath me, one I don't recognize. But it was shaped like an eye, and it was open. The neighbors don't come close anymore. Even the mailman only throws letters from the road. The birds don't land here. The trees don't rustle. The world avoids this place like it's already been forgotten. And that's what I'm becoming. A ghost in a house full of echoes. Sometimes. I still hear her voice, my grandmother's. I mean, the real one. She tells me, I'm sorry. She tells me there was no way out, but her voice is fading, just like mine. I tried one last thing. I stood in the center of the living room and screamed until my throat tore open, until the wall shook, until something deep in the foundation moved. And the house whispered back, Emma, you're safe now. That's when I realized it had never been trying to harm me. It had been trying to make me stay because it was lonely, because it loved me, because it was me. I was the offering all along. Now I don't fight it anymore. I wake up in different rooms, wear different faces. I am the whisper in the walls, the shadow in the corner, the soft creak of the stairs at midnight. I have become the secret the house keeps, the same way it kept her. And someday, when someone else inherits this place, when they walk through the door and feel that strange breath in the air, I'll be waiting, smiling, whispering from the vents, welcome home. It started innocently enough. I had taken a break from my regular work to finally tackle the cluttered study. The room hadn't been touched in years. A graveyard of old boxes, yellowed papers, and half-forgotten furniture. I had moved into the house almost 6 months ago, an inheritance from my estranged uncle, but I'd only ever used the study for storage. It had that unused, musty smell, the kind that settled deep in the wood and refused to leave. The discovery came when I was clearing out the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet shoved beneath the desk. Tucked between a stack of dusty architectural magazines was a heavy roll of blueprints secured with a cracked leather strap. Curiosity won. I unrolled them across the desk. My fingers traced familiar lines, walls, rooms, staircases. The plans were for this house, that much was clear, but something felt off. I leaned closer, eyes narrowing. There, tucked behind. The main hallway was a set of stairs that led up to a floor that didn't exist, a long corridor. 4 rooms, no windows. I knew every inch of this house. I'd renovated most of it myself. There was no such hallway, no stairs, no floor above the second, yet the blueprint showed it plain as day. I sat in silence for a while, staring at the strange addition. Maybe it was a mistake. an early design that had been changed before construction. But then, why were the pages dated just 2 years ago? And why had my uncle kept them hidden? That night, the sounds began. At first, they were subtle. Soft creaks overhead, maybe the shifting of old wood. Normal house noises, I told myself. But as the hours passed, the sounds grew distinct. Deliberate. Footsteps. Not quick. Not heavy, slow, and dragging, like someone limping across the floor above me. Only there was no floor above me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. As the steps moved from one end of the house to the other, precisely where the hidden floor had been drawn. I didn't sleep. By morning, I had convinced myself it was stress. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I'd been under pressure lately, juggling work, renovations, bills, finding something weird in an old house and then hearing things. It wasn't a leap to think I was projecting. Still, I couldn't ignore it. After breakfast, I took the blueprint to the hallway just outside my bedroom. According to the map, that's where the stairwell should be, between the linen closet and the bathroom wall. I knocked lightly on the walls. Solid. But when I rapped on the area between the closet and the wall, the sound changed. Hollow. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I knocked again. Still hollow. There was a seam I hadn't noticed before. Faint under the wallpaper. A vertical line so fine it was almost invisible. My heart began to pound. I fetched a box cutter from the kitchen and, hands trembling, began slicing along the seam. The old wallpaper peeled away easily, revealing a wooden panel, aged and warped by time. A hidden door. The handle was recessed, rusted nearly shut. I tugged on it, and it gave with a groan that echoed through the hallway like a dying breath. Behind it, darkness. A narrow staircase, ascending into blackness. The air that spilled out was cold and wet, tinged with rot and something metallic iron, maybe. Or blood. My flashlight beam barely penetrated the gloom, revealing old wood stairs. Caked with dust. I should have stopped then. Called someone. Anyone. But I couldn't. The staircase climbed farther than the blueprints had suggested. My legs grew heavier with each step, the temperature dropping sharply. Halfway up, my flashlight flickered. The beam stuttered, danced. On the walls. I caught a glimpse of something scratch marks gouged into the banister, deep enough to warp the wood. My breath misted in front of me. When I finally reached the top, I stood in a hallway that wasn't part of my house. The ceiling was lower, the walls closer together. The carpet underfoot was faded red, almost black in places. Doors lined either side, 4 of them each with tarnished brass numbers. 301, 302, 303, 304, just like a hotel. It didn't make sense. None of this space should have existed, and yet, it did. I walked forward, the flashlight beam cutting through the stale air, my footsteps swallowed by the heavy silence. I stopped at door 301. The knob was ice cold. I reached for it, then paused. There was a soft sound behind it, breathing, long, slow, rasping breaths. Not mechanical, not imagined, alive. I turned, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of the silence, the sensation of being watched. Every hair on my neck stood on end. Then something touched my shoulder. I whipped around. Nothing. Just empty hallway. But the door behind me had opened just an inch, and something inside was waiting. The door to room 301 creaked as it drifted open, inch by inch, until the narrow gap yawned like a mouth. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and walk away. But curiosity, or something darker, compelled me forward. The air inside the room was even colder than the hallway, dense and still. My flashlight flickered again as I stepped over the threshold. The floor groaned beneath my feet, and the smell hit me stale mold, rotting fabric, and something sharper, like copper. The room was small. A narrow bed with rusted iron bars sat against one wall, its mattress, stained and sagging. A single wooden chair stood in the far corner. The wallpaper, yellowed and curling, was covered in strange black smudges that looked like handprints, hundreds of them. I stepped closer to the wall. They were child-sized. Something crunched under my foot. I looked down. Fingernails. Broken, splintered. Some embedded into the floorboards like someone had tried to claw their way out. A cold wave of nausea rolled through me. I spun around, ready to leave, but the door had shut. I lunged for the knob, but my hand passed through it. My heart stopped. The knob wasn't solid anymore. It shimmered like a heat mirage, warping. Under my touch, my hand passed through again, and this time I felt nothing. Just air, as if the door wasn't even there anymore. I turned back toward the bed and froze. Someone was sitting on it. They hadn't been there before. A child, no more than 10. Pale skin, dark hair matted to their head. Their back was turned, hunched over as if cradling something. I couldn't hear them breathe. Couldn't hear anything. I stepped back, my mind racing. "Hey," I said, my voice hoarse. "Are you okay?" The child turned slowly. Their eyes were gone. Not gouged out, just empty sockets. Black pits that seemed to absorb light. Their mouth hung open, slack, and wet, and when they spoke, the voice that came out was not theirs. "Why did you open the door?" I stumbled back, hitting the wall. The child slid off the bed without using their hands. Just glided. "You saw the blueprints," it said. The voice was layered, like multiple people speaking at once. "Now you've invited them." "Who?" I whispered. "They're in the walls. They were buried here, long ago." This place wasn't built. It was grown. The flashlight died. Total blackness swallowed me. I backed toward the door, hands flailing, searching for anything real. But there were no walls. No bed. No floor. Just endless, suffocating dark. Then a breath, hot, on my neck. A hand touched mine, cold, fragile, like brittle sticks, and guided my fingers to something metallic. The doorknob. It was real again. I twisted it, and the door flung open, blinding light flooding in. I fell through it, landing hard on the hallway floor, gasping for breath, my flashlight sputtering to life beside me. The hallway looked the same, narrow, dusty, still lined with doors. But now every one of them was ajar, and from within each came a sound different voices. Some whispered, some cried. One laughed a wet, choking laugh that made my skin crawl. I crawled to my feet and stumbled back toward the staircase. My instincts roared. Leave. Now. Seal the door. Burn the blueprints. Get out. But as I turned to flee, I heard it. A voice from room 304. "Don't you want to know what he hid from you?" My steps faltered. He? My uncle? Against every ounce of reason, I walked toward the last door. The hallway stretched as I moved, unnaturally long now, like a tunnel. The carpet squelched beneath my feet, as if soaked through. The door to 304 stood open just a crack. Inside I could see something glowing, a shape on the wall. Words scratched deep into the plaster, written in blood-red letters. He opened the first door. You open the second? There's only one left now. And below it, a mirror. I stared at my reflection, and it blinked. I didn't. I staggered back from the mirror, heart hammering against my ribs. My reflection blinked again, slow, deliberate, then tilted its head in the opposite direction of mine. It smiled, but I didn't. Its eyes darkened like ink spilling into glass, and its mouth moved, forming a single word I couldn't hear but felt all the same. Soon, the mirror cracked down the middle. I turned and ran, bolting back down the endless hallway. The numbered doors groaned open wider as I passed, but I didn't dare look inside. I felt them, whatever they were, watching, reaching, brushing against my arms like cobwebs, like breath. The staircase was gone. The corridor dead-ended into another door. Black, iron-framed, ancient, no number, no handle. Just a circular indent in the center. I reached into my pocket instinctively. The ornate key I had used earlier was still there, its surface warm now, as if it had been waiting for this moment. As the key slid into the center of the door, it clicked not like a lock disengaging, but like something waking up. The door inhaled. It literally breathed. and then it opened not outward or inward, but folded, like paper peeling back, revealing. Pitch darkness behind it. I stood at the threshold, trembling, and stepped through. There was no floor on the other side, no ceiling, just a black expanse, filled with slow-moving shapes like people, floating. Some twitched. Others drifted listlessly, faces slack, as if caught in the moment of death. I couldn't move. My legs were stiff, my lungs refused to pull in breath. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Turning, I expected to see one of the shadow things. Instead, it was my uncle, at least. It looked like him. Same gray hair, same tired eyes, same crooked nose, but his skin was pale, and his feet didn't quite touch the ground. "You should have burned the blueprints," he said calmly, as if greeting me at a family reunion. "You never should have opened the third door." What is this?" I stammered. Why was there a hidden floor in the house? He smiled sad, distant, because the house isn't a house, it's a vessel. And it needs hosts, rooms to grow in, lives to consume. Our family kept it sealed for generations. "But you—" "I made a deal," he whispered. "I thought I could control it. Feed it just enough. Keep it asleep." I swallowed, my mouth dry. Did Grandma know? She was the first to lock it away. I was the fool who tried to bargain with it. Something shifted behind him. One of the floating bodies turned its head toward me. It had my face, eyes white, mouth open, and a silent scream. I stumbled back and my foot hit something solid. I turned. It was a small landing with a staircase leading down, back into the house, back into the real world. "You can still leave," my uncle said, "but only if you finish what we started. Seal the floor?" He nodded. "Destroy the blueprints. Bury the floor, lock the door, and never speak of it again." Behind him, the shadows writhed. "But if you hesitate," he said, already beginning to fade, "you'll end up like me, trapped, part of the house, forever." The stairs behind me groaned. I ran. When I burst out of the hidden door, daylight was bleeding through the cracks of the old wallpaper. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the door shut, and it vanished. The seam closing like scar tissue. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. Everything was normal again. Dusty, quiet, still. The hidden floor no longer existed, but I wasn't done. I tore through the house, searching every drawer, every shelf. I found the blueprints in the study and grabbed them. They twitched in my hands, twitched like something alive. I threw them into the fireplace and struck a match. As the flames caught, the house screamed. Not a sound, exactly more like a pressure in my skull, a shriek of pure hatred vibrating through my bones. The fire roared, swallowing the paper. And then silence. The heaviness lifted. The house exhaled. For the first time since I moved in, I felt alone. That night, I slept with every light on, a kitchen knife under my pillow. I dreamed of the mirror, of my double smiling at me from the other side of the glass. When I woke, there was a small crack on my bedroom mirror. Just one, right down the middle. The crack in the mirror haunted me. I covered it with the towel the next day, but that didn't help. I could still feel it watching me. Or rather, something behind it was watching. Every time I passed by, I could feel my reflection lagging just a second too long, like it was waiting for me to notice. But I didn't have time to obsess over it. After burning the blueprints, I thought the nightmare might be over. For 2 days, the house remained quiet. The air wasn't so heavy, the cold spots had vanished, and the whispers had gone silent. I convinced myself that I had sealed the floor, that whatever entity had haunted that space had been destroyed. Then, on the third morning, the mail arrived. No return address, just an old envelope, sealed with red wax. The stamp was faded as if it had been mailed decades ago. My name was handwritten on the front in a script eerily similar to my grandmother's. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a drawing, crude, childlike, done in pencil on yellowed paper. It showed a person standing in front of a tall, narrow house, eyes wide, mouth agape. Behind the figure, Looming over the house like a shadow was a massive twisted shape with hundreds of arms. At the bottom, scrawled in jagged letters, "You burned the wrong blueprints." I dropped the paper and backed away, heart hammering. The fireplace had gone cold days ago. But now it smoked again, thin trails rising from the ashes, as if the paper I'd burned hadn't stayed burned. I went back to the study, frantically searching every drawer, every cabinet. I found nothing, until I lifted the carpet. Beneath it, beneath the floorboards, beneath layers of dust and time, I found another tube. Inside were blueprints, but these were different, older, darker. They didn't depict my house. They depicted something else, entirely. A structure that wrapped downward in a spiral, like a staircase that tunneled into the earth. Rooms were labeled with numbers that made no sense. Room 0, room -3, room -12A. And there, scribbled in the margins, "The true floor is below. Only blood will open the descent." I didn't want to know what that meant, but something did. That night, the scratching returned. Not above, not behind. Below, I sat in bed, unmoving, breath caught in my throat. It started softly, like the claws of a rat, then louder, like fingernails raking against wood. Then came the tapping. Deliberate, precise. Morse code, maybe. Or a message in some language I wasn't meant to understand. Then the footsteps. Coming up from beneath the floorboards. I grabbed the journal, flipping through the dog-eared pages. My grandmother had never mentioned a second set of blueprints. But one entry caught my attention, dated decades before I was born. I sealed the known door, but the other grows. It feeds on memory, on blood. I must never enter the subfloor. If I do, I will never come back up again. I set the book down, hands trembling. Then I heard it, my own voice, coming from below, calling up through the floorboards. "Please, help me." I followed the sound like a sleepwalker, barefoot, numb, descending into the basement again. The locked door I had sealed days earlier was still shut, the keyhole dark and silent. But beside it, in the concrete wall, something new had appeared. A seam, fresh and wet, like a wound. The concrete was soft to the touch, wrong, too warm, as though it had only just formed. My hand sank slightly into the surface. Then it gave way entirely, peeling open like paper. A narrow crawl space stretched beyond. As I shined my flashlight inside, I saw stairs. Crude stone steps spiraling downward into blackness. The whispering returned, but this time it wasn't words. It was laughter. And somewhere, far below, my own voice continued to beg, "Please, help me." I crawled inside. I don't know why. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was the house's influence whispering that if I didn't go, someone else would take my place. The descent was brutal. The temperature dropped the farther I went. The walls narrowed, and I had to hunch, then crawl. The flashlight flickered, and the shadows moved like they had their own shape. Bones lined the walls, tiny bones, too many to count. The air tasted of rust and decay. After what felt like hours, the crawl space opened to a chamber. Lit by a single flickering bulb swaying from the ceiling. The walls were covered in drawings, just like the one mailed to me, figures in agony. Doorways that screamed, shapes with too many limbs. In the center was a slab of stone, stained dark with something that had soaked deep into the surface. Carved into the stone was one sentence, in the same scratchy handwriting as the blueprint: "Only oneself returns." Behind the slab was a door, not like the others. This one was a mirror, tall, cracked down the center. My reflection stood there, waiting. It smiled and waved. Then it stepped through. It stepped out of the mirror, my reflection, but not me. Its eyes were mine, but empty. Its mouth smiled, but the skin around it didn't move. It blinked, slow and deliberate, like it was still learning how to control my face. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the stone slab behind me. "Who are you?" I whispered. The thing didn't speak. It only tilted its head, watching me the way a predator watches prey. Then it looked around the chamber with a strange reverence, its eyes scanning the drawings on the walls, the bones scattered across the floor. It smiled wider. Home, it rasped. That voice was mine, but distant, cracked. Like it had been dragged through gravel. I turned to run, but the passage I had crawled through was gone. The narrow tunnel had collapsed behind me, replaced with solid, pulsing stone. I pounded against it, screaming, but it didn't give. Behind me, the thing that wore my face walked in slow circles, dragging its fingers across the walls. Wherever it touched, the drawing shifted, figures moving slightly, eyes opening. It spoke again. You opened the descent. Now I take your place. I spun, grabbing the flashlight, but its beam barely pushed back the shadows anymore. They moved now like they were breathing. I stumbled backward as my reflection advanced, step by step. You don't belong here? I said. Go back. But it only smiled again. I never left. You just didn't know where I was. Then it lunged. I don't remember the struggle. Just flashing lights and screaming mine and someone else's. I remember cold hands around my neck and a mirror that swallowed sound. I fought like hell, and at some point, the flashlight shattered, plunging the chamber into darkness. The next thing I knew, I was alone, back in the basement. The door sealed. The mirror gone. The key lay in the dust at my feet, snapped in half. I stumbled upstairs, my clothes soaked in sweat and blood. The house was quiet again. Still, too still. I staggered into the bathroom, flicked on the light, and looked in the mirror. And froze. My reflection blinked out of sync. Just a flicker. Just a second too late. But I saw it. The days that followed were worse. Things were off. My reflection watched me too closely. It smiled when I didn't. It moved when I didn't. People began to act strange around me. My coworker flinched when I brushed past her in the hallway. The barista at the coffee shop handed me my drink with shaking hands, and I kept finding drawings, taped to my car window, stuffed into my mailbox, slipped under my door. Each one showed a tall, twisted version of me, arms too long, mouth too wide, surrounded by scribbled words in an unknown language. The last one was different. It showed two of me, one in the mirror, and one watching from behind. I started avoiding mirrors, then reflections all together, store windows, puddles, phone screens, anything that could show me it. But they still showed him, to not me, and always he smiled. Last night, it went further. I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not in the house, in the walls. I pressed my ear to the drywall and heard whispering my voice over and over again. Let me back in. Let me back in. Let me back in. When I turned on the lights, all the mirrors in the house were fogged over. Not from steam, from breath. His breath. I flipped back through the journal, searching for answers. There were mentions of reflections, of the mirror twin, of how the house didn't just hide things below, but echoed them. Created versions of us, reflections made flesh, twisted by time and proximity to the hidden floor. One passage, nearly illegible, said, if the reflection escapes, it becomes the true self. The original fades, the soul erodes. You become observer. I couldn't breathe. Had I already begun to fade? Then the final straw? This morning I opened my phone and flipped to the front camera. He was there. Not copying me, not blinking with me, not me, just watching. The longer I stared, the more the smile widened. Slowly, the image reached forward as if he could come through. I screamed, and threw the phone across the room. It cracked, but I could still hear it whispers rising from the speaker, even after the screen went black. Now I sit in the study, writing this, surrounded by mirrors I've covered and phones I've smashed, but it's no use. He's already out, and I don't know how much longer I will be here. The blueprints were wrong. The floor never ended, and the reflection wasn't locked away. I lit the first match with shaking hands. The gasoline soaked through the floorboards quickly, filling the old house with that sharp, chemical smell. I walked room to room, splashing it across the halls, the stairs, the furniture, each step feeling more urgent, more necessary. I had to end it. End him. End me, if that's what it took. Because the reflection wasn't just following me anymore. It had started becoming me. I had lost time hours, maybe days. Found myself in rooms I didn't remember walking into. My clothes sometimes smelled of smoke or dirt or something worse. A neighbor waved to me yesterday and said, "You feeling better?" I hadn't spoken to her in months. I didn't even remember seeing her, but he had. The mirrors told the truth, always fogged, always occupied. Even covered in sheets, I saw him outlines pressed against the fabric, faces forming briefly before dissolving. Sometimes I woke to my own voice whispering in my ear. Sometimes dot dot dot. I didn't wake at all. I stood at the base of the staircase, the gas can empty in my hand, the box of matches nearly gone. The blueprint, the original one I had found, was in my pocket. It had changed. The ink bled and ran as if he had redrawn the layout to fit his needs. There was no hidden floor anymore. The entire house was his. I struck the last match and dropped it into the center of the living room. The flame caught quickly, racing across the soaked wood like a starving animal. Within seconds, smoke filled the room, and the fire roared to life. I staggered backward, eyes watering, throat burning, but smiling. It was over. I had beaten him. That's when I saw it. Him. Standing in the hallway mirror, not panicking, not screaming, smiling. He raised his hand, pressed it to the glass, and stepped through. He didn't come out burning. He came out whole. As the house around us ignited, he walked calmly toward me. And then I screamed because my legs wouldn't move, my mouth wouldn't open. I watched as he stood over me, placed his hand gently on my chest and whispered, "Now you know how it feels." And then everything went dark. I woke in the backyard, coughing, lungs full of smoke. The fire trucks were already there. Neighbors gathered in ropes, watching as my house burned too. The ground? Someone said they saw me running out just before it collapsed. But it wasn't me, it was him. They found the remains the next day. A charred corpse in the basement. Unidentifiable. The fire chief said it looked like the victim was locked in from the outside. But I know the truth. I wasn't locked in. I was buried. I try to live normally now. I rent a small apartment across town, no mirrors, no glass. I keep the lights low, the windows covered. But sometimes I see him, not in reflections. In people. The barista smiles too long. The man walking past my door limps just like I used to. The eyes behind the grocery store counter, they used to be mine. Last night, I caught my own face in a puddle. But the reflection didn't match. He was smiling again, and then he whispered, "One more floor." I threw away the blueprint long ago, but it keeps showing up folded inside my pillowcase. Jammed into the freezer, tucked in the pages of books I didn't buy. And each time there's a new floor drawn beneath the old one. Deeper, darker. No. Exits. Only a spiral staircase that never ends. I think he's building the house again. Not out of wood, out of me. And I'm starting to forget how it felt to be the original. Because the mirror doesn't lie anymore, and I can't tell who's standing in front of it, or who's trapped behind.